Just to set the context of the panel we've assembled, mix of customers, partners, ecosystem partners, and also the government. So first of all, can I introduce Commander Glen McEwen, who's Head of Cybercrime at Australian Federal Police. Welcome, Glen. Brian Hay, who's Head of Cyber, how do you say it, Brian? Fraud and Cyber at Queensland Police. Interestingly enough, all of the police organisations in every state in Australia are a Checkpoint customer, and we welcome Brian's business, but he's obviously on the front of the office side of it. That's my backup. Dmitri, yeah, we'll come to you, Inbar. We'll get to you. All right, just wait your turn. Dmitri, we met before in the as co-founder of CrowdStrike. I was going to say something else. Alastair MacGibbon, who is the head of security for one of our largest partners here in Australia, Dimension Data, runs the entire security practice for Dimension Data. He's got tons of people in there and they're helping them get very focused on security. Inbar Raz needs no more introductions to the audience. He's a Checkpoint man. John Waters, CEO, you spoke before, CEO of iSIGHT. And really pleased to have Andrew Dell, who's head of IT security at one of the big banks in Melbourne here, NAB, or the largest bank, isn't it, here in Melbourne? Depends whether we measure it. Okay. So, gents, we'll start off. The question that was sort of, these questions were put together by a number of people that we workshopped just to sort of get the thing going, but I'm really pleased we'll be taking some of your questions early. And that was, do we need legislation to mandate companies to provide a minimum amount of security practices, both technology, process and skills? There is the ASD Top 35 list of recommendations, but they're not mandated. Very much like the use of seatbelts and bicycle helmets, they never really got used much until they became law. What are your thoughts on this? I might direct this question first of all to maybe Alastair.
Thank you. Well, I'm a regulator at heart, being a former police officer, at least.
I was trying to leave that out.
So I do like the thought of minimum standards for everything we do. If we take a product safety standard to this, and I'll keep my answer short because we haven't got long, then I think that helps drain the swamp somewhat. But what I fear is that people do the minimum and then assume, based on a compliance regime, that they're secure. And we know that isn't the case. Good hygiene should not be mistaken for security.
Okay. I think we need to hear also from the government representatives on this question. Glen?
Well, what we've found, and I think everyone would accept, that these are one of the crime types that actually can be prevented. So having a particular level of cyber security posture would not only protect yourselves, but allow law enforcement efforts to be focused elsewhere. So mandatory or legislated, that's always going to be interesting. There's always that fear about government control, but definitely some sort of common understanding, appreciation would go a long way to not only protect yourselves, but also the community at large.
Great. Glen, while you've got the microphone, and we heard a lot from Dmitri around some of the threats, nation-state threats, particularly from offshore. In regards to cybercrime, what steps have been taken around the multinational collaboration that obviously our government needs to do? I'm sure you'd be sort of connected in deeply with that to deter cybercrime. Yeah,
well, thanks for the opportunity to answer that. Well, of course, as you'd appreciate, a lot of the focus from a cybercrime point of view, we are a victim. There are elements within society that we are a perpetrator, but a lot of it, where the focus from a cyber criminal perspective is from Eastern Europe at the moment. That's where our sort of focus has been, and what we've done. From a policy point of view, the Australian government has acceded to various international conventions that allow us to more freely exchange information around cyber. The Australian Federal Police, representing Australian law enforcement, have strategic placements or are about to embark on strategic placements within Interpol, Europol, and also the National Centre of Cyber, the Training Alliance in Pittsburgh. A big focus for Australian law enforcement in this sphere is actually taking the fight offshore, where we work very closely with our international law enforcement partners, and Superintendent Hay has also embarked on that on various levels as well. And we find that working with the local jurisdictions who, just by interest, some do have a far greater capability and cyber or jurisdictional or judicial focus than we do here in Australia. Romania is a fantastic example of that. And we've had extremely positive results in relation to that, which I can expand on, but I know time is short.
No, I think we heard about Romania from, I think it was John or Dmitri, I think it was John might have mentioned Romania. Well, maybe you could sort of tell that story. I heard you speak about it at another conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Recent experience with the Romanian National Police, there was a particular cyber criminal group focusing on Australia. They were utilising bulletproof services, and what they did was identified vulnerabilities within a particular national business here in Australia. It was a sort of a mum and dad business, and what they did there was exploited point of sale vulnerabilities when the businesses were put together. Obviously there was a range of products made available to them for point of sale and be able to do their business, and so they purchased quite a range of outdated products, of which this particular syndicate exploited, extracted around 500,000 pieces of financial data. So there was at risk of around $750 million. Out of that financial data, there was 30,000 pieces of that information utilised by this particular syndicate for a fraudulent spend of $30 million. We took the fight offshore. We worked very closely with the Romanians, and that's where we found that the Romanians have their own cyber prosecutor, and they have a very established understanding within this environment. And that resulted in 7 persons being arrested, and the actual syndicate was focused on everything from the actual intrusion itself all the way to printing the plastic. So it was a great example of international cooperation, and it shows that it does work.
Have you got a video of the door being blown off and the bust, actual bust? Did you bring
I
that?
do, but I actually haven't got it with me, unfortunately. But it's fair to say.
Okay. We'll see that next time.
They blew off the hinges. It was quite incredible.
Just on international collaboration, maybe some of our international speakers, Dmitri or John, do you have any other views on that and what companies or what governments need to do?
I think it's absolutely critical. It's an international problem, and at the end of the day, the only way we're going to deal with it is if we go take the fight to the enemy, to the adversary, right? At the end of the day, we can't hide behind our walls. The adversaries will always bring a tall ladder to climb over the wall that we've got, and law enforcement is absolutely critical to this. And I want to recognize, I think one of the key successes that we've had internationally in this area was just a few months ago with the Game Over Zeus botnet takedown that I know Australia participated in, FBI from the US, Canadians, UK, even Ukrainians. They actually, the FBI agent who was leading that out of Pittsburgh with the NCFTA group was telling me that they actually got the Ukrainians to go into Donetsk in the middle of the civil war to take down servers and complete the botnet takedown. So I think it shows you that even in the case of a civil war, you can get some good cooperation. Now, obviously, the Ukrainians right now are very interested in our support, and I'm sure that played a role too. Very
interesting. John, what are your take?
I think it's knowing what's achievable. You know, it's just to focus your resources properly. So I don't think you can go after everybody, because you have to understand whether, you know, someone's a Russian criminal and he's connected to the FSB and he's never left the country and he's never going to leave the country. I wouldn't spend a lot of time and effort going after him. In some places where you do have collaboration relationships and you know they'll actually action the intel, you can get a good return on your investment. But taking somebody out is usually the last resort. You start off at your own environment. What can I do to protect myself against it? Then you go to their environment through takedown services and others. Then ultimately, I mean, law enforcement's the last mile to say, is this an enforceable act? If so, then you can go execute it. You know, if not, you're kind of left fighting it at the other parts of the pillar.
Cool. Thanks, John. So changing tack a bit now, we speak a bit about the publicity of cyber breaches. Companies are very protective of publicity in a breach due to their brands. Should there be a more responsibility to share opening? I might get you to pass the microphone to Andrew from NAB, who might have a view on that.
For this one.
Just handball pass there.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's a question that's been asked for a long time, and I don't think we've ever really had an answer to it. I think my personal view is as long as we have enough exposure, and examples like Target are great to get it front of mind, the balance is probably right. I fear a culture where every breach has to be announced and it becomes noise and the real things that we need to worry about aren't heard. And that, again, it becomes, for those of us that are selling security to the business, it's more about, here you go, fear-mongering again, or trying to build a business case rather than actually looking after the thing. And the other case is there's the gap, right? So those of us that might find and report, that only tells one side of the story. There's all the unknown pieces about who hasn't been compromised and what isn't being reported. So it's a bit of a tricky one. I think as an industry, we sort of find that balance. Clearly, if there's a privacy implication, then there's some disclosure that has to happen, and that's right. But the broader legislative requirement to do it, I'm not convinced.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, John. I think, and I'll come back to you, Dmitri.
Yeah, just real quickly, just the benefit of disclosure on that side. So, for example, the target breach, minutes after the disclosure, the credit cards went from being traded at $112 to $3. So the losses are contained when you disclose it, because the value of what has been harvested goes down dramatically in the underground, and therefore the losses go down dramatically. So there is an economic incentive to disclose early, just to reduce the loss profile.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add that I've been a huge supporter of disclosure, but I got to agree with Andrew a little bit that we're getting so much disclosure now that it is becoming noise and people are ignoring it. When you have a breach report in the newspapers every single day, people get desensitized to it.
Yeah. And Brian, I think, there's government response on that?
Yeah, look, I think if you look at countries with card-not-present fraud, what drives card-not-present fraud is data breaches and then the application in the online environment of compromised card data. The only time I have seen a major country reduce card-not-present fraud since it really started burgeoning, since the introduction of the internet, was just prior to the introduction of mandatory data breach report in the UK. That is the only time in the UK history of financial products and card data that it actually reduced. Why would I suggest that it reduced? Possibly because directors were held personally liable if they lost data. So we saw less card data leakage in the UK markets because directors were being held responsible. And that can be the advantage. And this week I've just done the Australian Institute of Company Directors course. And they acknowledge there was a significant gap in their application of cyber security as a culture within organisations, and they agree it is not a topic sufficiently being discussed in the boardrooms of the companies in this country. If they were held personally liable, let me tell you, they'd listen.
So, Brian, while you've got the mic, I'm going to change tack a little bit here and ask, this is the question around, are organisations who want to track and transact online, banks, telcos, government, want people to communicate with them online, are they educating their customers enough? Are we actually doing enough to educate the community? I know you talk a lot about culture.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Absolutely not is the answer to that. And I think it's all about education, and it's all about further than education. If you look around, everyone is educating from the top down. What we're not educating is from the bottom up. We have our children. From the time they can walk, we teach them how to cross a road safely. From when they sit at a table, we teach them how to use a knife and fork. When they go to school, we teach them how to share toys, play in a sandpit. When it comes to the cyber environment, we throw them an iPad and say, leave me alone for 30 minutes, will you? Give me some peace. Now we've got to wonder why we've got a problem with cyberbullying, sexting, problems in school. The children of this country, of the world, have never had the fundamentals of how to get things right from the get-go, how to show respect online. That is an extension of your real community. When you speak to someone on the online environment, it's just like you were talking to your grandmother at the kitchen table. Show respect. And we've got to get back to the fundamentals. And we're embarking upon a project in Queensland. I'd like to acknowledge the support of Checkpoint coming on board with us to go into the schools to teach the kids in this country the fundamentals of showing respect online. If you look, it took us 100 years to start reducing the road toll. If you look at the evolution of the motor vehicle. It took about 30 years to actually enact, someone said before, a seatbelt. And that contributed to it. And it's about putting the pieces in the puzzle together. We've only had the internet for 23 years. We need companies like Checkpoint that are going to work with Australian law enforcement, to work with Australian industry and international industry to actually make a difference and build a culture in this community that supports the internet, values the internet, but protects its citizenship.
Thanks, Brian. I knew you'd have a strong view on it.
I did.
You did. Inbar, we haven't come to you. Do you have any sort of views on this topic?
Yeah, today's technology is quite complicated, frankly. And if you want to drive a car, you need to get a license, right? Hopefully they teach you how to properly drive the car and sometimes evade trouble. But if not, they'll just teach you how to pass the test. You don't even do that when you get a computer or a smartphone. And the dangers that you're exposed to when you're using some of these devices are immense. And as the black hat, I always think extreme. I also think that if you spend any time legislating, you need to legislate the vendors and hold them accountable for creating vulnerable software. Although, of course, we're all happy to be in the security business because that's how we make our living. Yeah. But we have existing channels to educate the public. Schools is one, television is another. We need to find a way to let the people know that it's nice to have a watch that can, prepare your coffee and buy you movie tickets, but there is a risk. If you want to take that risk, that's okay. But if you're unaware of the risk, that's a problem.
Good point. Glenn, I'll just take one more comment from you and then we'll go to the audience.
Absolutely. Just in support of the comments, particularly from Brian, we do need to bring it to the dinner table. That's fundamental in my view. Being able to talk about not only what happened in the playground with our children, but actually find out what's happening online. And I do myself, I have high-tech crime in my title, but I'm a low-tech operator, and I actually sit down and I ask my children, we're forever being the teacher of them. Perhaps it's about time we actually start learning from them. It's something that I believe that we really need to invest some time in.
Cool. So let's go to the audience. I know there'll be some of you who'd be eager to ask a few questions of these experts. Here, we've got a hand over there. So microphone, we'll go to that one. And then we'll go over, we've got one here and then back to the back there, Cash. So,
Ben Robson from IPSec. There was a mention before about making directors personally liable for breach disclosure. There are three effectively methods of actually breaching an organisation's privacy, being people, configuration and vendor issues. The people and the configuration, which again is local people, is under control of the employer. Surely holding them responsible for vulnerabilities introduced to their environment by software vendors, by hardware vendors, is actually unrealistic. And is any effort being made in relation to, for example, from the federal police, from state police levels, to get government to legislate a level of responsibility into vendors for the solutions they provide and therefore the risks they introduce into organisations?
That's a very long question. I wonder who's got the answer there.
Look, I was never saying mandating that you hold directors responsible. That is actually mandated in the UK for certain circumstances. And like every time you're held accountable, you always have defences and strategies. And of course, if you don't know that you've got a risk, well, then you realistically can't be held accountable for it. But if you should know, and you don't want to put your head in the bucket, whole different ball game. And I think you touch on another really good point. And if you look at some of the, I shouldn't name organisations, let's just say there's a couple of national bodies and state bodies are out there that are responsible for ensuring items sold to the public meet certain safety standards. Why is it you can go and buy a major database tomorrow and it's got 23 known faults that have existed of vulnerabilities for the last 10 years? That's crap. It is. That's absolutely, Is that a technical term? No, I was going to say bullshit, but that wouldn't probably cut it. But it's really not good enough. And you're right on the money. But you've always got an out clause, and people that do the right thing will always have nothing to fear. But what it does, it puts it on the forefront of people's minds and about being a responsible corporate citizen and about looking after your customers and your employees.
Thanks, Brian. There's a question over here.
Yeah, hi. Firstly, a quick observation of Inbar and then a question of John Waters. Inbar, it's fairly depressing but not unexpected that you've added a few more Australian examples to your talk from when I saw it at WestCon, Imagine, a few weeks ago. No, that was just an observation.
No comment.
John, you've mentioned the Target breach. I was reading in Krebs Security that Home Depot has been breached, essentially with a variation of the same malware, the black POS. Is anyone doing sort of like back bearings to see where it comes from, then trying to work out where else they've gone? Or are we just going to get these coming out all the time?
Yeah, when we comment on it very early in the process, we said there's the tip of the iceberg, you're going to see it. Whenever you see the proliferation of the code base as wide as it was, you've got different people that can weaponize it against different targets around the world. And you see variations of the code to specific certain types of POS infrastructure. So the commonality of the code that you may be referring to, and I don't have the specifics on it, we saw as maybe 60% of the code base that was originally sold being common, and the balance is being, handcrafted against a specific target. But yeah, it's going to continue, and that this is This is interesting to see the POS targeting specifically because literally 2-3 years ago in the black web, very little chatter or discussion around targeting POS systems and retailers. Today, in the cybercrime forums, about 20% of all the code being discussed, the capability being developed is around point-of-sale system targeting. So for retailers, it's definitely a transition point in which you can look forward to.
Alastair, I know you've got a strong view on that as well.
Do I? I think that, well, I'm going to go back to the mandatory data breach here. I'm also going to say that we don't do a very good job at triangulating issues. I don't think we're doing a good job at all, governmentally or corporately, going back to look at the people that write the code. And I don't think that there are millions of people out there that are doing it. I think there's actually a reasonably small number. When we do see the people that are writing the exploits arrested, you see a dramatic drop in the damage that's being done. We somehow view cybercrime as being this endless pool of people, and it's just not. We've just done a really poor job of going out after these people. And again, I've been part of that problem, and I think the reality is that we haven't really viewed it as a properly global issue and acted against it.
Thanks. Dmitri?
Yeah, I want to echo the comments, and I want to say that I think what's happening now, I liken it to what's been going on in the States in the 1920s and 30s, that law enforcement wasn't able to keep up with the growth in organized crime, and you basically had street thugs that earned a lot of money, built a lot of capabilities, and became the mafia. That was then very difficult to deal with. And
Chicago 1930s type thing.
Exactly, decades to do. And now you have in Eastern Europe the same situation. We had people that have been operating in the space 15, 20 years, completely free of any law enforcement harassment, made a lot of money. Now they're organized, now they have tremendous capabilities, a lot of resources, very hard problem to deal with.
Cool. Brian?
If I could just add, one of the issues, and please nobody quote me on this, but law enforcement needs to pull its head out of its clacker. And I say that because we still view the world in terms of jurisdiction. We still worry about borders. But the crooks, I'm not talking about prosecution. I'm talking about sharing knowledge, sharing skill sets, sharing intelligence. So you give the information to the jurisdiction that ultimately is responsible for possibly prosecuting that entity. But we still think in terms of, oh, it's outside my jurisdiction, doesn't matter. We still haven't caught up with the mentality that says cybercrime is omnipresent, it really doesn't matter. And we need to change our culture and have a good look at ourselves as the way we go forward.
Great. And I think there's a question down the back there.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is for Inbar. Software-defined networking, do you feel that's going to make it harder or easier to protect assets?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
It's software-defined networking. You've got vendors now with hybrids moving the control plane out of the data plane. Do you see that as going to be making life easier or harder to protect assets?
I'm going to say a general statement. The more a technology is oriented at better usability, the less secure it is. And it's always like that. It's always security at the expense of usability. If you want to be able, Apple just announced that they're going to let you pay with your phone. Well, guess what? In Australia, you guys already have the NFC credit cards. I can just walk next to you and charge you, right? So if I had that card, I would cut the corner because that breaks the antenna. But people feel that it's comfortable. It's more comfortable to just swipe your card instead of having someone starting to punch it in, swipe it, getting your PIN code. That takes 3 minutes. Just flashing it, it's a lot easier. So whenever you want usability, it's going to be at the expense of security. So I have no doubt there.
Maybe we can go to the end and get Andrew's perspective on that from the IT user's perspective. Software-defined networking, virtualization, a lot of things happening, Andrew.
I'll talk less about the SDN stuff and more about that whole risk proposition there. And you know, the reality for those of us in financial services is it's a risk appetite conversation for us. And we took a bit of flack with our internet banking mobile app being PIN activated rather than password about what that is. But that's a business decision for us in terms of how much risk we're willing to take on and how usable it is for our customers. And we get pretty clear feedback. Make it too hard for us and we'll go to someone else. So there's that constant challenge. It's up for us to make sure we can put as much control and inform the business as much as possible about how much risk they're taking on when they take those things. But it's a competition as well. So we're competing to be in the market, but also to be as secure as we can.
Yeah, and obviously at NABA, you know, you've got a couple of hundred people dedicated to security and fairly well funded, so you can fight that battle quite well. What's your view on organisations that are smaller? or that have less IT resources and less focus on this area.
Yeah, I don't envy the challenge, right? And the challenge is huge. The size of us is great, and I don't take that for granted. But it doesn't make our job any easier. There's just more attack surface for us to face into. And I guess that plays into the whole conversation earlier about regulation or prescriptive security. I think there's a place for it, but the bigger you get, the harder it is to consistently apply that. And if it's measured too tightly, it actually takes away some of our freedom to play a risk-based approach to security. If I did user access revalidation on everyone, I could spend millions of dollars, but that genuine account was compromised. All of a sudden, I've got a whole other problem. So I need to be able to have a bit more freedom in my budget too.
I just want to say this is one of the smartest things that you can take away with you. It's risk management, and it's okay to make a decision that your door is wide open. But reality shows that I don't know, at least 70% of the times, these decisions end up making themselves. There was no discussion, there was no awareness of the risk. Someone just made a choice, and it happened. But if it came to your desk and you weighed the risk and the benefit, and you made the decision, that's okay. Just make sure you're in control.
Good point. Is there another question in the audience at all? Do I see anything? Yes, we've got one over the back there. So we've got time for maybe this one and maybe one more.
Okay. Further to the point that was made on the smaller scale businesses. So as an industry, what are we doing to help out the small scale business people? If you're a big company, then you have probably funds that you can throw in to address cybersecurity. But what about the corner shop that would like to avail of the convenience for the customer? So
yeah. Well, I've got my president sitting here, so I've got to say the cybersecurity gateway 600 sitting in the shop back there. Retail price very affordable. But that's only one thing.
Well, can I pick you up on that? Yeah, in fact,
thanks, Alastair.
In fact, credit to you for building something that fits in that SMB market.
Thank you.
Because as someone that does a lot of commentating...
I can't take credit for it, but perhaps the president
congratulations,
can.
and I think it's great. And in fact, it is great because finally there's hardware that's affordable to the small business. Now they need to know they've got to buy it, because as someone that does a lot of commentating on this stuff, as several people on the panel do, I'm sick and tired of saying, change your password, patch your operating system, and have antivirus on your endpoint, and good luck. It's like wearing a mask around a bowler, right? It's good to do, but it's not going to necessarily protect you. The fact that we're now getting hardware down to the small business level is great. The next step is convincing them they've got to do it, and pricing it so that it's buy that and it's a router as well is a really smart path to take, and good on you for doing it. Next is getting it into homes, because we all know that it's really about what the end user is doing here. Whether they're sitting at home, then they go into their office and then bring the threat with them, as we've heard so many times. But it's pushing that level of sophistication out to a massive market that employs more people in Australia than any other part, and they just don't know what to do, and they haven't had the tools there to be able to do it until very recently.
Great, and I might point out that Alastair's a regular speaker on the security topic to non-technical groups. I think the conference you were at last week or the week before, Alastair, was a bunch of real estate? Yeah, conveyancing people who are fascinated about what they've got to do. There's one more question we'll take at the back, and then we'll head to wrap up.
Hi. So security today is very complex. There's many, many layers if you want to create a truly secure environment, or as secure as you can for your company and your enterprise. Are the multiple layers now from multiple vendors, the gaps between those layers creating vulnerabilities that are harder and harder to protect against?
Not necessarily vulnerabilities. I think the biggest problem is the more products you have, the more logs you have, and then you end up buying more products to look at the logs. At least if you, I do work for Checkpoint at the end of the day, right? So we have all the blades in one product. We have the best management. That's a good thing. But look at every other risk that you're managing in your life, right? You have a certain car, but you use a different firm for your coat and your shoes and your umbrella and whatever it is you need, right? And every one of those products covers a little piece of the problem. You have to be aware that it's a complex problem, and you cover it. There's no silver bullet. But if you have a product that does the job, reports problems, and then no one reads the logs or reacts too late, then it's not, effectively it's not there.
I just want to reinforce Inbar's point, if I may. Sorry for speaking twice in two questions. We've always gone for best in breed in this space, right? Everyone does bake-offs, and they'll always have a different formula for how they end up with the best bit of kit to buy. And putting the best bit of kit isn't solving the problem. It's how those bits of kit talk to each other in line. It's how we correlate this stuff. It's the fact that we actually review the logs. And that's automated, and that we actually act on things. We've got to, as an industry, move away from best in breed. As good as it is to have good products, don't get me wrong. It's like being at a high-end car yard. There's cars that do the job. So just assume if they're in the lot that they're good. It's how they work together that matters. And frankly, I hate to sound like I'm plugging integration here, but it's how they integrate, and then how they're managed by the institution.
Andrew?
Yeah, which leads nicely to my view, and I don't think there's necessarily a problem with having lots of vendors doing lots of things. I think that we as an industry need to get better at making that more integratable and more efficient. So, 10 partners with 10 different intelligence feeds and indicators of compromise, all 60% the same, and how can we reduce that, and the logs and how we analyse that is better. So I think we as an industry need to step up to, maybe it's not changing the products, but how can we share that intelligence and that indicator of compromise data more broadly and have less replication, because we just drown in this stuff, and if we can have it in a single feed, that would be beautiful.
Cool. Dmitri?
Yeah. It's a people problem, right? At the end of the day, you're dealing with an adversary that's coming after you. The way you're going to solve it is with your own people. And there's nothing wrong with technology, but you need to make sure that the technology that you have is making you smarter, right? You want to be in the best airplane. It doesn't really matter if the airplane is super sophisticated. You want to make sure it's better than the other guys. And that's how you're going to win.
Cool. So I've got one last computer-generated question. And please leave the audience with the last thought on it if it's not a question you want to answer, or say something else. If you could change one thing in the cybersecurity sector, what would it be?
More women.
I think that's a winner.
We should just end it on that.
Yeah, I do want to add to that.
Thank you.
First of all,
don't ruin it.
First of all, you all know I'm right. Second, I have a good perspective. I served in the Israeli military intelligence. We have over 50% women. Mm-hmm. The different perspective, the different approach, it's very, very important. We all come from the same background, probably learned at the same places or from the same teachers. And it's very important to have someone with a different set, not of just opinions, but principles. Right? Other people think differently. They have a way to approach things that you don't. And besides, it's just working with a company that only has men in it. It's just boring.
Great perspective. Thanks.
At the risk of adding to that, because I think that was an excellent one, but always think about what the adversary is going to do. They always have a move. This is a game of chess. You don't get to declare the game over. They will always do something in response, and you want to think several moves ahead.
Brian?
Risk management. Just as you jump in your car and drive down the highway, you can never guarantee you're not going to have an accident. It's the same approach to the online environment and cyber security. You will have accidents. It's about mitigating that risk.
Right, Glen?
Just reinforcing what Brian said earlier about, from a law enforcement point of view, a change for us is actually recognising that this is not something emerging. This is actually here and now, will be an enduring challenge.
Cool. And maybe if you can, we'll go to John, if you could pass the microphone. No, pass the microphone.
I'd say more humility. The reality is there's no one technology platform that solves all the problems. There's no one intelligence provider that's got all the answers and can track all the adversaries. So the reality is that it's always somewhere in between. So you got to try to be the best you can at what you do, but understand what the limitations in your business focus is, and be open and humble about accepting other people into the solution for your customer, rather than trying to build barriers between, best in class of one and best in class of another. They should be harmonized for solutions, and that's why I really applaud the Checkpoints framework and what they built here to allow best in class of very specialized fields to come together for a solution.
Great, thanks.
I think it's all pretty well been covered off. If there's one thing, and I guess it's all at the heart of it, is it's decomplexification of this issue for everyone. If there's a common understanding from users, from the business, from the industry about what we're doing and why we're doing it, then it makes our job that much easier, and it feeds into the risk and feeds into the diversity issue. So that'd be it for me.
Great. Alastair, I think we haven't heard. You can have the last word, which would be unusual for you.
Which would be what they said. I want to pick up on the same theme. IT security people manage to make IT security impossible to understand by anyone else. And they're always in the room proving they're smarter than the person next to them, to the humility point. If it was any other social issue, and that's what this is, everyone in society would have a view on it. And frankly, around my dinner table, in the conversations I have, people don't because they're scared, because we beat it out of them every time. We should view this as a social problem, be looking at incremental steps to improve the overall situation, which we just aren't. And that, to me, would be the way we get to a solution.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the panel and thank them for their time.